Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Rena. Thanks, everybody. Good morning. I'm Paula Partner, and
Morning.
I'm an alcoholic. So, before I forget, I want to thank the committee for asking me. I'm sorry we can't be in person, but we will be in person next year. And I want to particularly thank Chris H, my host, for all the things. Never mind. So, Chris, thanks for being you. You owe me a latte. Before I jump into talking about steps 1 and 2, let me start my timer, which, will be the thing you thank me most for doing at the end of this. And I want to say the most important thing about me, and the very most important thing about me, is that I have been sober since October 29th, 1979. I took my first drink when I was 14 years old. I took my last drink when I was 17 years old. And even at just 17, I barely made it into the rooms where you were waiting with hope and light and safety. And I did not know the meaning or the vision of any of those words. All I know is you caught my eye, and I could stay for that. I kind of never know what I'm going to say, so it's nice to have parameters, steps 1 and 2. But I always pray. We, everybody does, before we do this kind of any kind of service work, this kind of service work as well. And whenever like you're live at a conference with Polly, and one of us is going to speak, we get in a little circle and we hold hands, and we say beautiful prayers, I guess. Creator of the universe, please bring your light forward in me. Let the ears hear. Let my mouth be humble. All these things, and then we all feel really good and ready to go be of service, to the creator of the universe and the program that saved our lives. And then Polly ends it every time with this: just don't suck, which like ruins everything. But it's Polly, so you're gonna go, that was so clever again. So my job today is just not suck. And I don't have much time, so I'm jumping in. And I grew up in an alcoholic home. I can tell you about alcoholism from many perspectives. And I was the youngest of 5 kids, and the worst of my mom's alcoholism in Central California. And I can, of course, tell you about my alcoholism. And I have 3 sons. I had them far into my sobriety. The first at 13 years sober, the second at 15 years sober, and my last son at almost 20 years of sobriety. And my plan had been to parent the hell out of them. My plan had been to love alcoholism away. But our co-founder Bill said we don't just have one higher power, we have 2, alcohol and God. And only one can slay the other. Only God can fight that holy fight against the disease that we each carry in us. You'll notice that Bill Wilson did not say we have 3 higher powers. And as deep and instinctual and primordial as a mother's love is, and a mother's need to protect her children, a mother's love is not more powerful than alcoholism. And I can tell you this: we are not the people who stand still. It cannot happen. We are either pushing forward, we are all either trudging, crawling, skipping forward, or we are going backward. And my 2 older sons are now drinking like we drank, and they are dying of alcoholism. And now I can tell you from that perspective, the perspective I never wanted to have. And as Polly says, we have a progressive disease. It is true. It's considered a medically one of the great diseases, not great as in wonderful, great as in huge, like cancer. Cancer is a very good analogy to alcoholism. And because our disease is progressive, even as we are sober, my sobriety, as Polly has taught me, has got to remain progressive. I cannot be sober. I cannot be of service on my spiritual awakening from 5 years ago, on my 4th step from last year. It doesn't work like that. And I am telling you, back in my mama's home with the darkness of her alcoholism, she had also had every instinct to protect her children that all mothers have. And I know she loved me. But the last part of the first step, that our lives have become unmanageable, we do not control the consequences of our disease. The insanity is we think that we can. And my mother thought that she could, as the consequences got darker and darker and stopped falling in her bed and on her shoulders and turned instead for her youngest daughter. And there are things that happen to me that shouldn't happen to little girls. I know that there are many women here who can tell that same story. And you're looking at a woman today with 41 years of sobriety who is free and found freedom through compassion and service. And only God can take our dark past and weave it into a beautiful blanket of recovery and help. I seek humility all the time. If you know me, if you don't know me, you may have picked up on this already. It is ever elusive to me. As a matter of fact, you know how when there's funerals and people get up and say nice things about the person who died? People will never say is, she was so humble. No, I have a sponsee who promises she'll get up and lie at my funeral, so I feel better. But I'm always seeking it, man, because I don't have it. There's so many things, and my spiritual awakening, my coming to believe changes also, man. I just don't do that once, come to believe once. The come to believe in what I believed in at 9 months of sobriety cannot be the same as now. And tomorrow it could morph again. And what I noticed, interestingly, on this path of spiritual awakening and coming to believe is that part in that we read in like every freaking meeting we go to when the whole of how it works is read. I mean, the first and second step take up the first 59 pages of the first 164, and that's not including the doctor's opinion, which include the doctor's opinion. But what I noticed is this, man, it says powerful words. Right before it gets into the steps, it says this: we stood at the turning point. And then, like all sentences do, there's a period and a space until the next sentence starts. And then it says, we asked his protection and care with complete abandon. That space between where we stood at the turning point to when we asked, that space can last 30 years or 30 seconds. Choose. And that's all it is. It's a choice. Man, I came to you broken and bloody, a savage girl from a savage place, more feral than human, with brain damage and tattooed big toes, which I gave myself. On one big toe was the Blue Oyster Cult hooked across, and on the other one was the Rolling Stones mouth with the tongue hanging out, because I thought that would be intimidating, which, holy Jesus, I got sober in Iowa. Nobody sees your toes. So anyway, but you took me in. And you know how our big book talks about the 4 hideous horsemen of alcohol: terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair. Only 4? No way. There are so many more than 4. We are mothers who many drank through their children's lives. I know the shame of a mother. You know the shame of a mother. And there's whole parts of my childhood I don't remember, because that's how it rolls with our disease and my mom's disease. And there's a whole year I can't remember, but there are vivid memories I have, as if I'm standing there, as I'm telling you this, as if I'm standing there right now. And one of them is I'm wandering around the neighborhood. I was a little girl, 6, 7, 8, I don't know. And it must have been dinner time. I was always that smelly girl in the neighborhood, the stinky one who knew more than a little girl should know. And my hair was matted and I smelled, and I had the wrong clothes on for the season of the year I'm in. And it must have been dinner time, because I could see into the neighbor's picture window, and I remember being hungry. They were a vision of something I had never seen before. They were sitting at a table together, and they were talking and laughing, and they had all kinds of food at the same time. I remember standing on the far side of that great green grass, looking at that vision and knowing that beauty was never for the likes of me. but you found me. You took me in. I will never be done paying back my debt to you. And I never want to be done paying back my debt to you. And that does not just apply in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a big life in AA. There's nothing I love more than you people, but I have a big life outside of AA too. In my job, I'm in my 10th year as a community organizer, a little part-time, great fun job in the elementary schools. And what I do is I find little tiny kids who don't have a grown-up showing up in their lives, man, who are falling off the face of the planet and nobody is noticing but me. And to this day, when I'm looking for another little kiddo for my program, and my colleagues in the other school buildings are like, how do you find so many kids? They don't know I have a superpower. Because when I'm looking for another little kiddo to put in my program, I walk down the hallways of the elementary school and inhale. Because I was a smelly girl that smelled like gasoline and cat litter, and I know what I'm looking for, and I find them every time. And it just occurred to me like this year, I think, or within the past couple of years, that I approach those little kiddos the same way, kind of. I approach new women in AA, or new women I'm sponsoring, and I can see them, man. I can see them because I was them, and as I'm walking toward them, they're scanning me. They're scanning me. They're scanning safer danger, because the very survival depends on that skill that they have developed that other little kids have not had to develop. And I sit down. It's so important to get down to the level, to be physically at their level. And I find some reason to touch the little faces. I don't even know how I know to do that. I pretend their hair is in the way, or that they have something on their little faces. And that's when their shoulders relax and they understand that they're safe. And I always start with the same words. I say, oh, I'm so glad I found you. And I am fierce. And then they are mine. And I get to track them all the way from tiny kids in elementary school till they graduate from high school. God has taken my dark past and made it into my greatest possession. There is no greater possession than that. Another way to say our dark past is the language of the heart. Remember this, man. It's not like Bill Wilson came to and said, I'm going to call my old school friend Ebby, see if he knows something about not drinking and some kind of power greater than us. No, Bill had been in and out being treated by Dr. Silkworth and other medical people, and he believed Dr. Silkworth. He respected Dr. Silkworth, and he still couldn't get sober. And Dr. Silkworth had to also have pain be his touchstone, because he had to say to Bill, I don't think I'm gonna be able, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I'm gonna get you sober. I'm so sorry to say this, but I don't think I'm gonna be able to do this. So Bill went back home again, and come knocking on his door was Ebby without permission, and said the words that are the language of the heart. It's only the words. It's the secret and love language of Alcoholics Anonymous, man. One drunk to another drunk, shoulder to shoulder, knee to knee, eyeball to eyeball. Because we know what you have been through, and once we start talking, that we do know that we are together in this. When this whole Corona thing first went down and we went into lockdown, a third cup of coffee, and look what I mean by a cup. Anyway, my friend Mike, a taper from St. Louis, reached out to me, and he sent me this like a format for a Woodstock conference, where every speaker takes a step, and he says, I'm going to put this conference on Zoom. Can you take a step? I said, sure. And then he says, can you help me find other speakers? And I said, sure. And then Tina came in, and oh my God. And so we get up ready to kick off the first Corona conference, and 30 minutes before we're kicking off, the guy who was supposed to be the first speaker, he was supposed to be on for a little while, help introduce and that kind of thing. And he flipped out at the technology. I mean, bless us, it was new to all of us. He goes, I can't do it. And I'm like, what do you mean? We're going live in 30 minutes. And as he's saying this, I'm looking at the screen, and Miss Tina had just come on. I'm like, never mind. And I threw the ball to Tina because I knew she could catch it and carry us through. Thank you, girl. Plus, she never sleeps. So there's that. But after that very first corona, when you speak, you put your number in there, and all that, and I did that, and around about midnight that night, I got a call from a brand new woman in her first day of sobriety, and she wanted to talk, and so she said, I said hello. She says, I'm going to text you. So we start going on text. Whatever, man. God and AA will meet you where you're at. If the best she could do is text, all right, I'll deal with that. Now, so she starts talking, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Bad things have happened to me. And as women in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know where that's going to go. And I was just loving her where she's at, texting back, wherever she wanted that to go. And then finally she said the word. She said, but I was raped. I said, I know, baby, me too. You're going to be okay. And that's when she got sober. Now, I'm not a psychopath. well, no, I've been tested, so I'm not. And it's not like I would go back in that past. I mean, if I could and change those, what those bad men did. And, I can't say that I wouldn't change it, have a life without that. But on the other hand, man, I can say that those things also help make me the woman I am today. That without that piece of that dark past, that woman would not have met me at the language of the heart. I'm a historian. I have my master's degree in the ever totally unhelpful medieval British history, which I always point this out because I'm of service. If that's something interesting to you that you want to go get your master's degree in, there will never one day be a day that you open up the newspaper and it says in the want ads, wanted medieval British historian. No. Anyway. And it was expensive. Anyway. But in studying for my master's, we had to read research that got released to us from the U.S. government, and which is considered the gold standard of historical research. And there were some odd things, man, that I noticed about our disease, even as I'm studying war and battle before and after mechanized warfare. And I noticed this funny thing, man, like I could take you all the way from Alexander the Great first cross the Indus River to the Battle of Bosworth and Richard III scream and betrayed his kingdom for the horse. And the funny thing I noticed is this: every one of those battles was not ever lost in the frontal attack, not one time, by the enemy that the standing army had prepared for, knew was coming, had spied on, knew what weapons had probably faced before. No. Those battles were lost every time on the flank, on the sneaky sideline, by the army that had stayed hidden at just the right moment, that the standing army had not seen, had not prepared for, and wiped them out. I read that and I thought, oh, there's the land of alcoholism. Waiting, brilliant. And it will say, it will evolve to each of us in particular. And it will say things that will catch your eye, that will catch your hearing, and it'll take your eyes off the prize, and you'll bend your head forward and go, yeah, I am alone all the time. Or, yeah, I am right all the time. Or however it speaks to you in a million ways. All we got to do, man, is stand the front line. We are facing an enemy we cannot win against in single-handed combat. Yet, we must stay that front line. Ladies, pull up your army boots, adjust your tiaras. We are going in. I have outside issues. They do not belong in an AA conference, an AA meeting, but I'm going to mess up and mention them in case it's helpful. So just buckle up. I'll float in and we'll get right back out. I have outside issues. I have depression and I have post-traumatic stress disorder. You're going to be all right. Why I even mention it is this, because until I was about 20 years sober, those things would appear, because I don't control when they come or they go or their intensity, but they'd appear and it'd take me out for the day, man, or however long it took. People would say, how are you? My anxiety's off the charts, man. I'm just going to stay home and rock back and forth. Or, the darkness would descend because I don't control it either. And I'd lay in bed and wait for it to pass. And then when I was about 20 years sober, man, God spoke to me and said, you can help somebody. So I got my ever increasing fat ass out of bed because I can help somebody at the front line, man. I have tics because of my anxiety disorder, whatever. I'm still going to be on that front line. Sometimes I'm afraid. Sometimes I'm sad. Sometimes I'm not any of those things. And I'm still going to stay that front line. Yet here's how it has to change. Here's how it morphs. Yes, you will find me right there, no matter what. But at my side is the God of my understanding, the master of the universe, the healer of all things, the light of the whole world. And that higher power is standing right there on the front line at my side. And it is God who holds the sword and the shield. God is the warrior. My sacred duty is to keep my eye on the flank for that sneaky alcoholism. And if you've been around long enough, you've heard that old-fashioned saying that when we're in a meeting, alcoholism's out in the parking lot doing push-ups, just another way to say that it's progressing, that it's ready, that we have to stay vigilant. And yes, all that's true. And it's a fine analogy. I understand its meaning. It's fine. But I think there's a little bit of difference. And here's what that is. When we gossip about one another, when we diss how another AA meeting in their own sacred group conscience has decided how to be or run, worse, when we think someone else's sacred seventh step is our business, alcoholism is no longer in that parking lot. We have flung open the front doors and said, come on in, take the best seat in the house. And because the second part of the first step, our lives are unmanageable, we cannot control the consequences, we let that baby in, kill somebody I love. Why not? I was convinced that my mother and my sad circumstances had caused my alcoholism far into sobriety. I was sure when I was a little girl that if I could have just had all those things I saw other little girls have, I would be okay. My sons have had all those things, and they are not okay. They're dying of alcoholism. If you think, even a small part of you thinks that someone else caused your alcoholism, let me be your proof that they did not. I was court mandated to come to AA meetings since I was 14 years old because my mom had joined AA almost to the day I started drinking. So all of a sudden, there were things like forks and curfew and like carrots. Like, wait, what? I mean, I'm the youngest. I'm ready to take off for the wild like my other 4 older siblings. But no, all of a sudden we had like to eat at 6 o'clock. And I hated my mom, but I loved my mom, And as she'd see me go wild, I was worse with my drinking than any of my siblings. I could see the look on her face, man, and I wanted that to not be there, but I had fallen in love with the liquid higher power. It was my first lover, my first God, my first best friend, but it is the master liar, the master manipulator, the master thief. It will tell us every time that next drink, and we will feel the same way as the first one, against all evidence. It's like this. I'm constantly trying to lose weight, and people will say, stop eating cookies. And I'm like, well, I really like cookies, so it can't be that. You see? And it just doesn't work. And the way that I forgave my mom for all that stuff that went down in her drinking is this, man. I was waiting for her to do her 8th and 9th step. She died with 20 years of sobriety. I was waiting for her, man, to tell me she was sorry for letting those bad men in our house and, all that. And And she never did. 20 years of sobriety. I mean, I was like, hyper focused on it. If only she'd say she's sorry. If only she'd acknowledge what happened. I could be okay. Then in my journey in AA, I could find forgiveness and freedom and peace. And she never did. So as a grown ass woman, I had to take the steps, and the places the steps have led me to find my own healing. And again, to turn it into my greatest possession as another form of the language of the heart and reach out to other people. And I did do that. And I remember waking up my mom the first night, all that dark stuff went down, and asking her to save me. But you know what? She couldn't save me. She was already broken. Saving me was going to have to be up to God and me and Alcoholics Anonymous. And one of the other vivid memories of my childhood is I remember being a little girl, and I think I was 8 years old, and I was begging God to help me. Please, please help me make it stop. And I woke up the next day and it hadn't stopped. And I remember saying, I hate you. But here's what I know. God did hear me. God was with me crying too. And here's what God was saying to me through all those dark nights. Hold on, daughter. I am sending Alcoholics Anonymous. All right, Rennie, you need to mute your little self, darling. Can somebody mute her?
Why is it on the cord? I don't know.
Okay. Host.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That God was saying, hold on, daughter. I am sending Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. There you will be rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence. I am a daughter of the power of the universe. We are all daughters of the power of the universe. But here's the deal on that, man. We each carry that inside of each of us. It is the great reality inside you, inside me. And I sponsor a lot of women, and I love them desperately. But they how sponsors will call them, they'll want specific answers to specific problems. And I don't really flow that way, man. I mean, what I tell them is I trust the great reality. I trust your higher power. I trust the sacredness of your 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th steps. And I don't mean to piss all everybody's upcoming steps. I'll stay off of that now. And I don't do that because I want them to get off the phone. I'll always say, did you pray about it? Did you pray about it? And I don't do it because I don't know, I've run out of things to say. I got a lot to say, but I say it because I'm really interested to know what their great reality has in store for them. And I need to know as their sponsor so I can know where we're heading with this. I am not the creator of love or time. Sponsors will say, thanks for your time. And I say, I'm not the creator of time. God created time. I'm just going to keep saying yes and let God expound God's ever expanding creation. How I first learned about love is this. I was crazy in the first 4 or so years of my sobriety until I fell in love with the big book at an embarrassingly 5 years of sobriety. Sorry. Apparently you guys have been hiding it from me. Actually, what I thought is I'd write my own version for cool hip people with tattooed big toes. Anyway. So I was working at a nursing home. I was about 3 to 4 years sober, and I still had that organ of hate and self-pity for what had gone down and that everything was my mother's fault. Though I wasn't drinking, man, and I wasn't doing any other outside issues. And there was this resident, I was 19 years old or 19, 20 years old. And there was this one resident in this nursing home named Edith, and she was a nightmare. Her kids had abandoned her there, and she was smarter than all of us combined. She had a wicked mouth. And so I come on to my shift that night, and I have Edith, oh no. And I mean, to say that I had a lack of social skills is putting it mildly. And I hated men at that point, and I really hated women. So I was a little bit lonely and angry, and I couldn't understand why no one wanted to be my friend. But so I have Edith, and the worst is I have to give her a bath. And oh my God, she's ruthless. So I'm wheeling her down and I'm like gritting my teeth and I'm going to be nice to Edith. I'm going to be nice to Edith. So to get up, and she's paralyzed, half of her's paralyzed. She's 82 years old. She weighs 80 pounds, but her mouth overcame all that. Even the only half of it that could work could cut you down. And I'm gonna do it on time. And so I'm wheeling her down, and how you get a paralyzed person into a bath is like you put them in this, transfer them to this special chair, and you take off all their clothes, and then you pump them up with this gurney system, and then they're in the air, and then you position them over this big special bathtub, and then you like pump them back down. So now Edith is in the air naked, and I think to myself, I'm gonna reach out to Edith. And I thought to myself, what would an old and lonely person want to talk about? She would want to talk about her past and her history. So at 19 years old, I said to her, Edith, did you used to be pretty? She said to me, did you? And I know a master when I see one. And that old and bitter and lonely old woman became my best friend. I would ask to have her. I'd bake her special cookies for diabetics. I'd do her fingernails and toenails and do her hair. And even when she wasn't on my hall that night, I'd hurry do my duties so I could go be with Edith. She'd listen to the stories of the man of the week who would break my heart because they kept not marrying me, and we'd been dating for a week. Jesus, gentlemen, pick it up. Why I even tell that story is this. I know that you think you know what love is and what love looks like. It's 5'6" in female, or it's 6 foot in male, and it's that or it's nothing. It's that or it's going to be a horrible Christmas or Valentine's or anniversary of your birthday or whatever it is. No, we did not create love. Love is an invention of God. How I learned love is that old and bitter old woman. Only God could have done that. Love could be that dog from the shelter that you go get. Love could be a stinky and smelly, abandoned and betrayed little girl wandering the neighborhood. Be open to that. God is the God of options and chances, of ever folding miracles that we cannot even see. And never forget courage. Courage is not the lack of fear. Courage is also being afraid and staying in that line anyway, no matter what. One of the greatest things I ever read or saw about courage is this. Before COVID and after COVID, I'm a big traveler. It's the biggest thing I do, I think, is travel. And I mean, of course, for AA, but not for AA too. Lots of fun. And me and St. Richard, my husband, go lots of places, whatever. I have an old car. I'd rather go to Paris than buy a car, for real. It's just a decision, that's all. And so he and I were in Prague. And in Prague, there's this famous wall called the Lenin Wall. Now, Prague, remember, until the 80s, was still under the difficult, deadly, dark control of the Soviet Union. And there were Soviet soldiers wandering the streets at night with machine guns to put down any dissidents. And to hear the rat-a-tat-tat of that machine gun was a normal sound in that Czech Republic, not an abnormal sound. So when I say the Lenin Wall in Prague, I know you probably think it's from the Lenin of communism. No, it's named after John Lennon, because even under that regime, Prague citizens would sneak out at night and write letters of hope and courage to their fellow citizens. And every morning the Soviet soldiers would come and wash that stuff off and patrol it to kill anyone daring to post such messages. But to this day, as Prague is now a free country, everyone from all over the world goes to this wall and leaves messages for other people of humanity, of hope and love and courage. And we were there and I saw this. It said this: courage is not always about winning. Sometimes it's that small, quiet voice at the end of a hard day that says, I will try again tomorrow. When I talked about we stood at the turning point, that's in how it works. And then the next, we asked his protection and care with complete abandon. There's not just one turning point, many as we are sober. My rage brought me to a turning point where I stood and had to decide at the next point, God is everything or God is nothing. My neural pathway that was always something would go wrong and when I'm going to kill myself. That pathway, I stood at the turning point and had to make a decision. God is everything or God is nothing. My sons who are dying, I go back and forth at the turning point. But God is everything or God is nothing. And what do I think? That if the very worst happens, God will leave me? No. God will not leave me. You, my sisters, will not leave me. I've never been alone. Even in the midst of the darkest times, on the darkest mountaintop, in the deepest valley, when it seemed I stood alone and looked upon a universe where every trace of him seemed to have vanished. And in the still whisper, God still says, I am here, daughter. How I found forgiveness for the men who had harmed me when I was a little girl, as I was in labor with my son I had when I was 13 years sober on no medication, and it was not going well. I'd been in labor for 36 hours and we were both crashing. I had lost too much blood and my son was stuck in the birth canal. And they didn't know it, but the cord was wrapped around his neck. So with every Pitocin-induced contraction, my son was strangling. I was on no drugs, not even a block in my spine. And when the room emptied of the normal doctor, the normal nurses, and the normal equipment and filled with the specialists, and at this moment, I looked to this side of my bed, and walking up to my bed was my grandmother, who had died 10 years before. And my friend Craig, who had died of AIDS 5 months before. And they brought such peace and light, and I thought they were there for me, but they were not there for me. At the same moment, the new nurse had come on, the specialist of dead babies. She leaned over to this side and she said to me, Paula, I'm going to get you through this. And I looked at her quickly and looked back, and my grandmother and Craig were gone, and she did get me through it, and I delivered my son. The room went silent for a long time while they worked on him, and finally they got him breathing, but it was so quiet. And even I, an inexperienced mother, could tell something was wrong. For just 1 second before they took him away in the special equipment, they let me hold my son. And I looked down on him and I saw that he was perfect and beautiful. And for no reason, out of nowhere, my very next thought were of these men who had hurt me when I was a little girl. And I realized for the very first time that they had been perfect and beautiful too. And someone else had turned them into monsters. And who better than me to have compassion for what must have been done to those baby boys? And I was free. And it's compassion to this very day that gives me freedom. And Sandy Beach was perfectly right when he said, something goes down, you got about 10 or 15 seconds to make the decision. You're going to go with God as everything? You're going to go with faith and pain? Or you're going to go with resentment and hate? You got a choice, you really do. Now if you go with pain and that God is everything, God can do something with that. God can take you to great places, even though it hurts. That's courage too. I'm going to close pretty soon, but I want to say a few more things. When I was court mandated to go to AA meetings since I was 14 years old, because I was always in legal trouble, so pretty much from my first drink on, and I was always either drunk or on something else, going to every meeting I ever went to for those 3 years till I was 17 and finally really got sober. And so I don't remember a word that was said. 3 years of AA meetings, I don't remember a word. But these are the same meetings in Grand Island, Nebraska, a tiny ass little town that my mom went to, and everyone loved her. So my mom would go to the meetings, and say, Paula tried to kill me again today. Paula ran away again today. Paula stole from me again today. Paula screamed at me again today. She hit me again today. And I knew she was going in there. I knew they knew. So I'd go in, fists raised, man, ready for the fight. And there wasn't one, ever. And they knew I wasn't sober sitting in that meeting, their sacred meeting where they have one shot in a day to try to save their lives. And there I was pissing all over that with my disrespect.
Why are you doing that?
They met me with kindness and love. So when I was 17 and had to try to make it, I was so afraid. But I remembered how they made me feel. I remembered the love. Never forget. We are in the business of saving lives. If you get a shot to save a life, you go ahead and take the shot. And let me say this too, lead with love. It will never be the wrong decision. God in AA, one more time, met each of us where we were at, no matter what had been done to us, no matter what we had done. It took me forever to grasp the idea of that there is a kind God, and that could be the kind of God for me. When I was 4 years sober, my sister and I took a long trek in the midst of winter, 2 days before Christmas Eve, to Washington, D.C. to spend Christmas with my other sister out there. And I was like 4 years sober. It was 1983, maybe 21 years old. And so me and my sister in my crappy college car with my little baby niece took out all the way from Nebraska to Washington, D.C. in the midst of winter. And there had been a big wreck on our way, and we stopped and helped the young woman, and it put us way behind on the timeline. So now, we're still trying to make it to DC, and it's the middle of the night. It's midnight now, so it's one day before Christmas Eve, and we're in the middle of sorry Sharon, God-forsaken Iowa. And I mean, my sister loves shortcuts. She'll say like, well, let's just generally head east, So we're on some road with no lines. There's no lights. We hadn't passed a gas station, nothing. And my car dies, stops in the midst of winter. The engine's not running, nothing. And now we're in some real danger. And my little baby niece is really in some danger. So the plan was I was going to get out of the car and just guess where to start walking. Because again, we didn't see any lights, to try to find some help. And just at that moment, on the only hill in the state of Iowa, comes these two headlights. And my sister, a relatively stable person, said, oh, good, help. Me, a mostly unstable person, said, oh no, axe murderer. And it was this farmer dude. And let me just tell you, if the world goes to hell, you want a farmer on your team. So he pulls over and he says, can we help you? And can I help you? And I'm like, well, we don't, the car just stopped, we don't know. And so I happen to have a wire coat hanger and some duct tape in my car. Sounds like I was going to kidnap somebody, but he fixed my whole engine with those two things and saved us. And he says, I got to run, and you're going to be good now. We're like, and we said, can we pay you? We were saying to him, anything, like, you saved our lives. He goes, no. I'm like, really, anything? And here's what he says one day before Christmas Eve: take it as a present from him. Now, in my first year of sobriety, I was savage, man, and I was institutionalized for almost the first 2 years of my sobriety. So at about a year, you had caught my eye so much. You had shown me that freedom and peace and family was possible, and you were my family. And so I'm in this higher power you talked of. I had my first spiritual awakening with just this. Maybe. that I approached my counselor with the first, thing about it that most of us start with. And I said to her, if there's a God, why did all those bad things happen to me when I was a little girl? She said, oh, baby, God didn't make those things happen. Faulty and broken human will made those things happen. But now God has given you Alcoholics Anonymous to try to help you mend those things. So I say to you, take it as a present from him. I know the day will come when my grandmother will return for me. And on that great day, I imagine she would take me by the hand and lead me to finally meet face to face the God of our ancestors. And in my imagination and in my deepest hope, I only yearn to hear one thing: that God will lean forward, touch me on my face, and say, well done, daughter. You were so brave. Thank you.
Oh, Paula, that was absolutely wonderful. I can't thank you enough. And I think we'll all get you unmuted. And of course, I don't know how to do that, so that we can all sing your praises, because that was so profound and so heartwarming.
Everybody's crying.